All right, let's get this bread.
That's how you should start every podcast episode.
Let's get this bread. I'll leave it in there. Welcome back to the Commerce Collective podcast brought to you by Flywheel. I am your host, Emma Irwin, and I'm a brand marketing manager over here. Today is going to be fun because the bread that we're going to be getting is an update/overview on Amazon's performance in the EU, felt specifically by vendors who have been seeing declines in their weeks of cover. You might be saying to yourself, hey, those seem like two totally different topics, but I promise that everything in this web ties together. You'll just have to listen on to see how. Let's first start out by meeting our guest and the person spearheading this research here at Flywheel.
I'm Kelly Miller. I'm VP of Commerce for the EMEA team. I lead in Europe the strategy across our European markets for our commerce teams.
Because today we are talking about Amazon, I must know what the last thing that you purchased from Amazon is.
The last thing that I purchased on Amazon was tempered glass screen protectors for my boyfriend's phone.
Heck yeah.
And I have a funny story about it because he took 35 minutes to research, one, if he needed tempered glass screen protector, two, the best brand to buy on Amazon. He went through reviews and ratings, and he did more consumer research on this than anything that I have ever seen in my life. So that is my last purchase on Amazon. That should have been a 30-second purchase and was absolutely not.
You know, I understand there's so many of them, and when there's that many, it's overwhelming. And you're like, well, okay, let me get into the Reddit forum of the world of tempered glass screen protectors.
Yeah, he was looking at Quora questions and answers and stuff. Oh, it was dramatic.
Are tempered glass screen protectors.
Truly.
And if you were wondering, Kelly's boyfriend ended up picking the Amazon's Choice tempered glass screen protector in the UK, which is basically the first one you see after doing all of that research. Now that we know who we're talking to, let me break down what we're covering today. We're going to start with looking at Kelly's research on weeks of cover, then we'll talk about why Amazon has been reducing stock in the EU and what it means on a larger scale, and then we'll dig a bit into what vendors should be doing to adjust to reduced weeks of cover for their businesses. With that, my first question to Kelly was, why do we and brands look to weeks of cover as such an important performance metric?
We monitor weeks of cover for our clients because in general, it's an analysis or a view of how healthy your catalog is. When you look at your weeks of cover, the traditional weeks of cover amount that you usually look for is somewhere above 6 weeks of cover. What this means is that Amazon has enough inventory for the amount of sales that would occur over a 6-week period on an average weeks of sales on Amazon. And when we think about what weeks of cover signifies to a client, it means I have stock on Amazon. I'm not going to go out of stock anytime soon. And when we are evaluating this for our clients, we typically say that anything less than 2 or 3 weeks of cover, you're at risk of going out of stock. And so that's about the time that we look to our clients and we say, maybe you should place a born to run order, or you should nudge your vendor manager or your AVS to place orders for you.
I see. So I'd love to know, specifically, what exactly we're seeing currently when it comes to the decline in weeks of cover or purchase orders that Amazon is placing. How significant is this decline and how long have you been noticing this going on?
Yeah, so from about the start of the year, we started to have clients coming towards us saying, hey, Amazon's not placing purchase orders as frequently as they used to or at the level that they used to. And so we really noticed that this trend declined actually from about the Cyber Week period of 2023. So about November 2023, that's when weeks of cover peaked. And ever since that, you can see that actually units on hand at Amazon warehouses and units that they're actually purchasing has gone down steadily since then. And then the real flip that we noticed was that in about April of this year, we saw that weeks of cover drop below the 2023 levels for the first time. So it was the first time that we actually saw the crisscross of the axes to see that weeks of cover dropped below 2023 levels.
I see. And is that applicable across Amazon as a whole, across every single category that's out there?
It's actually not. So the trend that we're seeing, when on average, we're seeing a drop in weeks of cover, but we're seeing that it inversely affects the clients that we have that are in hard lines and soft lines. So clients that are non-FMCG products, so non-fast moving consumer goods, are being hit the most. when we have a client who is in hard lines and soft lines, their products tend to be the products that consumers have slightly more consideration for than the fast-moving consumer goods, like going online and buying toothpaste, for example. That's a very quick purchase. The purchase of expensive headphones is going to be the ones that seem to be impacted by this weeks of cover change.
That is the observation, but I'd love to know, get into why it's happening and why it matters. And so I know that as a vendor, these weeks of cover declining does not seem good, bad vibes overall for the future of my business or even e-commerce in general. But can you tell me why Amazon has been slowing down POs for many vendors? Is there any positive light here or some kind of broader strategy for Amazon?
Yeah, definitely. Usually we look at weeks of cover as its decline as something that is concerning. That's something that we typically raise to our clients and we say, hey, maybe you should check what's going on with this drop in weeks of cover. This time, we've been a little bit less concerned about it. And it's because when we look at their Q1 results, we're seeing that they specifically mention that they're finding efficiencies in their supply chain that are allowing them to hold less stock. So they, in their Q1 earnings report, firstly, they mentioned that they've hit profitability in the EU and internationally for the first time. That is a huge step forward for them when the last time that they hit profitability in the EU was literally the pandemic in 2020. And this is a really, really tough market to crack. So the fact that they did that is absolutely massive. And if you look at the Financial Times, they're talking about how in the EU, they actually see this being a regular trend. They don't see this as a fluctuating in profitability, but rather a continuous trend of profitability in the EU. And the learnings that they're taking in the US, they're applying into the EU. So when we talked to our US team, they went through really, really similar challenges a couple years ago and even a year ago, where you saw them experiencing declines in weeks of cover. You saw them driving efficiency towards getting consumers the packages that they're ordering faster and holding less weeks of cover because they're able to do that. So really, it's a good thing. It's kind of a disappointment for this year because you're seeing that drop in weeks of cover, but it's really good because it means that consumers are getting their packages faster. Amazon doesn't need to hold as much inventory, and actually the efficiencies that we're finding allow us to have a more stable supply chain overall with Amazon, which if you ask any vendor, their supply chain has been a very challenging issue since the dawn of Amazon in the EU.
Interrupting here as narrator Emma, because at this moment in the recording, the lawn was being mowed, the dogs were barking, the sun was in my eyes, and it was all chaos, and you can't actually hear what the question was. My next question for Kelly was, why did it take so long for Amazon to reach a profitable state again after the instance during the pandemic?
Yeah, the EU it's a really complex market. The supply chain element of it is not straightforward. Even if you think about things like logistically, we've had to figure out how to manage Brexit in terms of the Amazon supply chain or managing cross-border shipments. There's a lot of complexity in that Amazon has had to figure out. The EU itself is inherently a more complex conglomeration because it's more diverse marketplaces. The consumers themselves haven't adopted Amazon in 100% the same way that we have seen in the US. And so there's a natural sort of let's figure it out as we go, but also as we don't necessarily always know how consumers are going to react, our supply chain isn't always going to be as straightforward.
So now that we've kind of set the scene of what we've been seeing and why, what does this mean for vendors today who are seeing these changes and are going to need to adapt? Can you share some advice or kind of tactical things that vendors can be thinking about right now to help adjust?
Yeah, I think part of it is to remember that this is just a rebalance. It's a rebalance that the US did that we're now doing in the EU. To me, this is not a load of, oh God, we need to change everything or we need to be worried about our figures because Amazon's not going to have the sell-through that they are. It's actually not true. Amazon's sell-through has increased. Amazon's traffic has increased. It's increased by 6.2% year over year. So there's more traffic in terms of number of glance views coming to site this year versus last year. That does not indicate to me a concern in terms of consumers going towards Amazon. Likewise, the conversion rate itself has also increased. It's increased by 3.1%. So more consumers are coming to Amazon and more consumers are converting faster on Amazon. And so the concern that there is less stock going into Amazon is actually more of just a short-term pain and not necessarily something that to me is a big red flag that Amazon is not a healthy place for vendors to be. And so I think that that's something to remember is The real change that has occurred is efficiency and the ability to hold more fast-moving consumer goods than ever before, which is a very positive thing for the majority of our clients who are in the FMCG space or in a space where Amazon is a critical marketplace that maybe before wasn't as viable for them because profitability is a challenge always on Amazon. And we're always trying to find a way to deliver lower priced items like toothpaste to the consumer. What this actually indicates to me is that Amazon is willing to do that now more than ever. They found the efficiencies that allow them to do that so that they can reach more consumers with the items that they're actually looking for, or that consumers are actually looking to buy on Amazon, which are the things like, your stock up items and the low ASP items that you want to buy. You just don't want to have to go to the grocery store to buy.
I was going to ask, and I think you kind of answered the question all in this, but when it comes to like finding these efficiencies, and we're talking about Amazon working toward profitability, like you would think that means that they want higher ASP products and are focusing more on SKUs like that where the margins are greater. But it doesn't necessarily sound like the case because the figuring out the supply chain efficiencies can kind of take the place of needing to focus on the higher margin items, if I'm thinking about it correct.
Yes, you totally are. So Amazon previously used to be a place where if you were a vendor who was selling a low-priced item, just the cost of shipping that item alone could have been something in the range of like 3 to 6 pounds or euros, which is super, super high when you think about toothpaste, which is less than that typically when you're buying toothpaste. And so when we talked to vendors, we were constantly telling them, you need to make higher priced items. You need to make bundles. You need to focus on the higher price SKUs in your catalog because even a high margin SKU is still going to be a challenge if it's a low priced SKU. And so now we have vendors who we're seeing Amazon purchase their lower price SKUs and be willing to purchase their lower price SKUs and list them on site much more recently because it seems like they found the efficiencies in their own supply chain that allow them to stock these items. That means that they're not as reliant on those higher priced ASPs or those higher priced items. So they're not as reliant on the higher price SKUs in the catalog to lift up the lower price SKUs because they can actually sell both in an efficient way.
You published a blog post to the Flywheel website all about this as well. But there's a line in there that I would love to dig into more. And it was talking about how like vendors are feeling the strain of these lower sell-in rates, particularly if they make advertising budget decisions based on sell-in rather than sell-out. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I'm trying to like comprehend in my head what making advertising budget decisions means based on sell-in or sell-out.
Yeah, totally. This is something we talk about with our vendors all the time. Vendors tend to be metriced or be, even bonused on the sell-in number. So what is getting shipped to Amazon? Because when they ship a product into Amazon, they get paid because Amazon is taking control of that inventory. So once you get that payment in, you have the money to spend effectively. So for a lot of our clients, they make their advertising decisions or their advertising budget decisions based on, well, how much money do I have? So if advertising is a certain percentage of your total income from Amazon, that's a lot of times how a client will decide what to use for advertising. What we tend to recommend is, for a number of reasons, to base your advertising decisions on your sell out. Number one reason is that sell out is a measure of consumer demand, and consumer demand is an indicator of how many consumers are online. Therefore, you need to capture that in your advertising budget. So if you are only looking at sell in, a couple things. One, you might not be hitting the exact sort of budget compared to the time frame that the consumer is actually online. Two, you might be missing the instances of transshipment that are occurring on Amazon as well. So Amazon might purchase something from you in Germany and they might sell it out in Italy. So a consumer purchases it in Italy, but you're making your advertising decision in Germany based on the budget that's there. And so we try to get our vendors or our clients to base their decisions on sellout anyway. But this is a really good reason, again, why? Because sellout right now is higher than ever before, but when they're looking at their sell-in is a lot lower. And we don't want them to be making a rash decision about a media budget at a time when actually the demand is as high as it is.
The absolute last question I had for Kelly related to this topic was just, what makes her excited about the future of Amazon in the EU? Profitability is a woo-woo, but what next? Like, what's the next bread to get?
I think what's exciting for me, I come from a retail background. And with that, things like AMC previously, or even the media world in general, they didn't always resonate as strongly with me. I understood them. I understood their importance. But when I think about what AMC means, it means so much more than media than ever before. And I get really excited about the thought of how we can use AMC to understand retail more. I give a couple examples of this, and my favorite one is through AMC, we can do a really in-depth market basket analysis. Vendor Central has this market basket analysis tool that says these products are purchased together, these 3 products are purchased together X% of the time. AMC is like, this product is what they purchased first. They then went, and 6 weeks later, they purchased this other product. And then they purchased this other product 4 weeks later. That is so powerful because it goes so much further beyond the traditional market basket analysis. And it's not something that I think vendors on Amazon in general are fully aware of, is this power of the AMC insights driving retail changes. And it's something that I really look forward to in the future. And of course, AI, automation, all of that, very exciting as well. But I think that's one where if I'm thinking through the retail side of what's coming, and that's something that I don't think everybody is paying attention to.
And of course, we wrapped up with something on Kelly's digital wish list that she won't purchase and why.
An air fryer. I have been holding out on the air fryer for a very long time. And it's for a really silly reason, which is I don't like clutter on my countertops. And an air fryer is a big cluttery item. I know that I would love it, and I know that it's useful, but I just can't pull the trigger yet. And maybe somebody along the way is going to make one that is compact and it can pull out of a drawer for me. And if they do, you'll bet that I can convert on that.
For sure. If there was one that I could put in an upper cabinet and just open the door and I think it's a fire hazard probably, but it'd be nice in theory if it could just go up in the wall.
Exactly. Like a microwave, but for an air fryer.
Exactly. Someone will figure that out, I'm sure.
One day.
And that wraps up another episode of the Commerce Collective podcast. You can read more about this topic on Flywheel's blog, which if you haven't checked out recently, you really should, because we've got some really cool insights in there, and we've been working pretty hard on bringing that resource way up to the speed, rocket ship to the moon, you know it. With that, I've been your host, Emma Irwin. Stay tuned for some exciting content coming up these next few months, and I will see you next time.